folks, this time we have a Firefly FFLPS, which I think stands for Firefly Les Paul style guitar. It's a pretty good deal. You have to order them from Guitar Garden, I do believe, when you're online. Sometimes Amazon has them, I think, or they used to. They may not anymore. But they're fairly well-made guitars. Stainless steel frets were included. This one was picked up by a friend of mine a couple months back with the lovely gold hardware. But he was less than impressed with the actual sound quality from the pickups. So we decided to swap in a set of Tone Rider Birminghams and give it a try and see what it sounds like. So I'll follow along and see what I had to do. This being the first Firefly I had seen, I was really quite interested in the neck and the fretwork on it, after hearing that they were stainless steel frets. And I will say that the fretwork was actually quite good, only taking a couple of hammer strikes to set a couple of them back in place, and a couple needed slight filing. In fact, I'd seen much worse frets on some recent Squiers that I've worked on that cost more than twice as much. So here we're doing a little polishing, get everything up to spec. The other things that I was interested in were the finish on the guitar and a lot of the other things that will go along with, something in this price point. And that is one place it's really kind of hard to show in the video, but the finish on the guitar wasn't quite finished. It had marks in it that faced one direction where it obviously been run on a polisher and never perhaps sanded, if you will, and almost feel like it could have possibly used some wet sanding in places. But I did decide, we'll just polish it out and see how it comes out. But so here, let's get the pickups and whatnot stripped out of it so we can get the new Tone Riders in. Just taking all the gold parts off and being very careful to keep them together. Gold stuff's more expensive and harder to get a hold of, so I'm always really way more careful with the pieces and parts that go along with them. And using a little bit of low-tack tape to keep the pickups in place so I can turn the guitar over and not have everything just fall out and scratch and beat everything up. So then we'll take the potentiometers loose to help with the polishing and the rewiring. I will say, too, that the wiring was a tad unusual. A lot of extra wire. Kind of surprised. Generally, these manufacturers will go with the least wire used method, and this actually used quite a bit more. It was wired more like a Fender and less like a Gibson, if you will. So here I'm going to head and cut out the volume pots because they're going to be replaced with the nice Bournes push-pull pots to be able to use the single coil sounds on the Birminghams. And then we can pull the pickups out now that they've been cut loose. With the pickups out and all the other hardware out of the way, I decided to try to repair the finish as much as possible. Using a medium cut pad, we went ahead and buffed it down quite a bit, trying to remove the lengthwise ridges, if you will, that were in the finish from being run on a polishing wheel. And the polisher came off really dirty with kind of a black residue on it, and the guitar had a much almost lighter appearance to me after being done, so it looked a lot better. I'm not sure what the black residue was. Probably something from the factory, though, or from shipping. Something along those lines. And then here on the back, you can see it actually had some scratches from being played and moved around and whatnot on the back. And medium cut pad did a really good job of getting those out. So just took a little time. And if you were willing to go to the trouble to do this stuff, it really does give this guitar a comparable finish to, like, say, a new Epiphone or other more expensive guitar. I was a little bit pumped to hear what the Birminghams would sound like in the Firefly. They provide really good sound quality for the money. They're a great value, sometimes as much as a third of the price of some of the other bigger brands. And I've never had a bad sounding set, and the customer service is exceptional. So as I fiddle with the screw here, we'll get these guys mounted to their mounting rings and then start doing the awesome job of fishing the wires through the cavity, which is always a pain in the pickguard mounts can be quite a bit easier. You just mount all the pickups and then wire them up. But in this instance, I like to do one at a time when you're doing a cavity like this. That way you don't get them mixed up and cross up wires. So I'm going to reuse as much of the factory wiring as possible. It's brand new. There's nothing really wrong with it other than the odd way it was wired. Here I put the cover back on to keep the controls from flopping around and damaging the back of the guitar after polish. So yes, we're going to continue. We're going to reuse the capacitors and some of the wiring. So here we go ahead and pull the pickup wire through. I'm also going to keep the switch and the switch wiring. Like I said, nothing wrong with those components. They are brand new. And the Firefly components are the larger American standard size pieces, except for the potentiometer's actual faceplate holes. They are metric, which are smaller. They're not the 3/8 like the Americans, or 1/4 inch, I believe. So I did have to ream them out for the Bourne's pots, which are unusual. They have the coarse style tip, like for the knob, but they have the larger American size threads on the base. So here we're reaming the holes out so they will fit, because I want to use push-pull potentiometers on here to take advantage of the single coil split capabilities of the Birmingham. They do sound really good when they're split. If you put the front and rear pickup together and split them, you can get a kind of somewhat quacky, stratty kind of sound out of them. Now we're going to move to using mimetic polyalloy to install the electronics. Mimetic polyalloy is probably the hardest thing Arnold Schwarzenegger ever had to say. And actually, it's just lead solder. So let's get these Bourne push-pull pots installed. A little bit of solder here, a little bit of solder there. Make sure everything's grounded in the correct places. I'm going to reuse the tone pots and the capacitors, but I'm going to use a more traditional wiring style that you would see in a Les Paul, using the capacitor to actually connect the tone and volume together. Now we'll reinstall the potentiometers. And you always want to make sure and tighten the nuts on the potentiometers well, but don't crush the face of the guitar. But I will say this one was delivered with nuts that were barely finger tight, which is a bad idea. A loose potentiometer ends up with a broken solder joint almost every time because somebody will spin it harder than it can take and break it loose. Let's get it strung up and adjusted so we can see what our low buck beauty sounds like. It certainly looks nice. Hopefully it sounds as good as it looks. I tried to play something simple so you could really hear what the pickups sound like. It's hard to play the same thing twice, but, you know, I gave it my best shot. There you go. I think it sounds fantastic. For less than $350 and a little bit of work, it actually came out to be a really pretty good guitar. You might be able to get something better for 350 bucks, but you could definitely do a whole lot worse. So, hey man, thanks for checking out my video, and be sure to like and subscribe.